everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, photographers meet here to connect, inspire, and create. My guests captivate us with their images, they inspire us with their stories, and they share valuable tips on how you can improve your photography skills. The schedule for our upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com. Under Happiness Hour, you'll find the links to previous sessions posted to my YouTube channel. Tonight's guest is Charlotte Rhodes. Charlotte is a wildlife photographer based in the United Kingdom whose love for the animals of the Masai Mara continue to draw her back to the incomparable African plains of Kenya. Charlotte's images are more than just snapshots of the Big Five. They are intimate portraits that reflect relationships between predator and prey, baby animals at play, and sometimes her subjects are just the vastness of the plains filled with beautiful light. Every image has its own story, a moment that can only be seen because of the click of her shutter. In tonight's presentation, Africa, Finding Magical Light, Charlotte shares her tips for photographing and embracing the light that makes a compelling image. She'll talk about the magical light and infinite space that Kenya has to offer a photographer, and how you can apply her techniques on your next wildlife outing at your local wildlife refuge or on a bucket list destination. If you're on Instagram, you can find her at Charlotte Rhodes Wildlife, and you can connect with her through her website, charlotterhodesphotography.co.uk. And if you've been dreaming about a trip to Kenya, you can check out our workshop offerings there. So welcome back to the Happiness Hour, Charlotte.
Thank you.
I'm needing more excitement than this. I know it's like almost 2 a.m. your time.
Yeah, always my best time. I'm about to tell you how important it is to get up really early in the morning and how the mornings are important. So I think I'm a morning person.
You're a morning person. I don't think anybody's like a 1 a.m. person, but I so appreciate you coming and dragging yourself out of bed to do this presentation for us. The magic of Zoom has allowed us to connect with people all over the world. And, you doing this for me is just a gift. So it's good to see you. We'll do a disclosure. I met Charlotte. I was telling the people in the room earlier, I met Charlotte through Instagram, and I was new to Instagram. I think you were probably in the top 5 people that I started following. I didn't know you, but I kept seeing your beautiful photos, and I finally followed you. And I don't know, at some point we started chatting and we've become friends. And this is, God, 2016, 2017, I think.
Yeah.
So I've known you for a few years. I've had the benefit of getting to travel with you and then going to your hometown to visit. And so people, she is lovely. So it's so much fun when I have friends that are talented and they're willing to come and share with my other friends in the room. So with that, Charlotte, what did I skip? Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Probably apart from when we first met, I scared you in a bar in in Oslo because although Jane was in on the secret, you had no idea I was turning up. So
Oh,
I just
yeah.
thought it was a
So
local weirdo, I think.
yeah, you did kind of frighten me. Okay, so Jane is in this room, and Jane is my travel partner. She's probably the person I've traveled with the most, and I travel a lot. And I'm high maintenance, and Jane puts up with me, and she's lovely. And Jane and I met on a trip, random, and we decided to go on a trip together. And I said, I know this is crazy, but she follows Charlotte as well. And because I made her and she likes animals. And I said, I know this is crazy, but would you mind if I invited Charlotte to join us in Norway? And she's like, no, go ahead. And so I invited Charlotte, and Charlotte says, oh, I'd love to. It sounds like fun. And then basically she couldn't do it. fast forward me sitting at a restaurant, and this woman comes up to me and says, "Excuse me, do you speak English?" And it's like, "Yes." "And do you know what this is?" And she's holding a stuffed animal. And I'm like, "No." And she had been working, this is so embarrassing, Charlotte. She'd been, I had, I did not know the difference between a lion and a cheetah and a leopard, other than some of them had spots. And I really couldn't tell the difference between the cubs. And I know that frustrated Charlotte to no end, to no end. But she came up to me and says, "Do you know what this is?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "We've been working on this for a year." But it was a great surprise. And I got to spend a couple of days with her with us in Oslo. So, all right. So that was our first meeting. So fast forward, how many trips have you been to? How many trips have you been to Kenya? How many times
Uh,
have you?
it's
You go at least 2 or 3 times a year, don't you?
yeah, it's probably somewhere 30 plus now, yeah. So yeah, very, very lucky. It's a lot easier as well to obviously get from here to Kenya
Um,
as well. We don't, you've got to come to the UK really, or somewhere into Europe to get head down into Africa really. Apart from some of the very, very long flights now, so it's a lot easier for me.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think the quickest one I probably did was maybe 3 nights there or 4 nights there. So you can do it if you want to, but that's quite tiring.
That's a long way to go for such a short time. And then you're so connected to the wildlife there, and I think you're connected to the people that you've made friends
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Um, and so it's hard to get there and have to go, turn around in 3 days. There's no way. Um, so anyway, she knows Africa. So with that, go ahead and let's get into your program.
Yeah, cool. And just to warn you, especially Jane, there's a cat walking around that seems to be quite keen to join us as well. It feels a bit like the COVID days. So if someone pops up or if I scream when she digs her claws in me, I
It,
apologize
it,
now.
it won't be the first time somebody's pet has joined us. I've had two presenters, one do it from his vehicle and his dog popped in, or his dog popped in. And so that's nothing new on. So,
She's quite good at doing that for work. So, right, I'll see if I can get this presentation started.
okay.
Right, it is a blank screen, so don't worry. That's supposed to be
It's
blank.
it's
Okay.
perfect.
Right, so I'm going to cover, as Linda said, I'm going to go through a few photos specifically looking at light in Kenya. I'm going to I've put a few in also from the UK, really just to show that, it doesn't have to be big cats or whatever to actually get some of the, to really enjoy the light and get some of the best things for your photographs. I'm going to touch also, if we've got time, on weather as well. When I put this together, I think I slightly underestimated how long it was going to take. So please stop me, Linda, if I go on far too long. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I've already said my best time really in terms of the day is first thing in the morning. So a lot of the photos that I'm about to show are predominantly actually really early in the morning, but there are a few that will be sort of just before sunset. But for me, especially if you're in Africa, but the same applies when you're at home as well. The best time of day really is first thing in the morning. I know for most people, setting that alarm when it's dark and heading out when it's dark isn't pleasant, but it's kind of really, really important. And I think, you get the benefits of that as well. So when I'm in Africa, I stay in areas where you can go out when it's very early. So the whole point being that you hopefully will find something interesting to photograph and spend time with when the light is starting to develop. The last thing you want to do is obviously head out and find that that you've got beautiful light, but you're still looking to try and find something. It does happen inevitably, but you want to give yourself as many chances as possible. So, if you're going somewhere, I'd really research which areas allow you to head out early and which ones restrict you until you get in. Your guides are really important. They know what they're doing. And obviously can help set things up for you, which if you get people, and especially if they're good about photography themselves, and also, like I say, get out of bed. It's really tempting when the alarm goes off just to press the snooze button. It was about at 1 o'clock this morning as well for me. But at the end of the day, it's really, really worthwhile you're doing. So I'm going to cover some photos, predominantly actually cheetahs and lions, and really all about backlight. But I'll talk through why I've chosen the ones that I've done, a little bit of the stories around those sort of animals as well, and then we'll move on to some of the other animals as well. So first of all, so this is Quayle, and it's a female cheetah, and at this point she had three sub-adult cubs, so pretty much teenagers, to be honest. And one of the things with cheetahs is, generally speaking, their eyesight is pretty poor at night. They do all the hunting during the day. And so if you leave them in the evening, in the morning, they're probably likely to be in the same area. So that's a really good starting point for when you're wanting to try and find something in the morning. So that the specific morning, we headed out, we went back to the same area. Unfortunately, they were still there. The three teenagers were lying in a bush, still sleeping in typical teenage fashion. Mum was already up, mum was already looking for food. And so in this case, you know, the sun's starting to rise. What we've done here is we've positioned ourselves so we've actually got the light behind her. And a lot of these photos really are all about using backlight. You know, I do hear a lot of people when I'm out photographing both in the UK and also in Kenya, really, where people think that you've got to have the sun behind. And in many cases, that is true, especially when the light's a lot higher. But in these cases, you know, it's really for me, getting this sort of light, getting the colours, in some cases getting the glow off the grass. But you know, as you can see from the cheetahs, the fact that the light picks out some of the fur and really highlights the shape of the cheetah, backlight, you know, is a really important technique to use when you're photographing. So in this particular case, what I've done is I've actually I play around with exposure a lot when I'm taking these sorts of shots. I'm making sure that there's a background. So you can see that in the background is grass and bushes. That obviously gives something to have the contrast of the shape of the cheetah against. So it's not a silhouette shot, which is obviously if you're taking against the sky. And it's just picking up the lines of the cheetah. You might not know which cat it is. Linda probably didn't. But at the end of the day, you know that it's a big cat because of the shape. But the exposure that I've used really means you can't really pick out the features of the cat, but you get that beautiful shape that cheetahs are. A little bit later, so the sun's risen a little bit more. The light's obviously changed. There's not the same sort of color, that orangey color that there was in the previous shot. But again, this is still, you know, very similar position to where we positioned ourselves for the last photo. But here, one of her cubs has now got up. So mum's very, very keen. She's seen the gazelle, and the second cub, so the first cub has now joined her. Incidentally, it's a female cheetah, that the cub, the two teenage boys still in bed, still relying on mum to get breakfast for them. So there's quite a lot of similarities between cats and human beings. And then if you can see the second cheetah, the one that's slightly further away, that is the cub. And one of the main reasons you can tell is you can see the hair on the neck. So there's a lot more hair, and the light, so the backlight is picking up that fur on the neck. And cheetahs, when they're born, have a lot of neck hair, and as they get older, they start to lose that. So it's one of the telltale signs that that's still quite a young sub-adult. But for me, you know, going back to the backlight, it's picking out the hair on the stomach, on the neck, on the throat, and obviously on the chin. And that to me, actually on the tail tip, actually, now that I've seen it, and it just the light really emphasizes this. So I've used a slightly different exposure than the previous shots, and now you can get a lot more detail. You can see all the spots, which you couldn't see so much in the last shot. But you don't have the same color either. And really, a lot about this is about playing around with exposures. It's quite critical for something like this. Your aperture is, I think I use something like f8, f9, because I want both cats in focus. So it's also thinking, you know, really thinking about your aperture as well. This is another day. So this is a female called Sierra. Incidentally enough, she had a few cubs. I think she had about three sub-adult cubs at that time as well. And again, we've intentionally positioned the vehicle so that we've got the light behind them. If it the shots would still be, lovely if you're on the other side, but it's obviously what sort of style of photography that you want. And again, in this case, you can see that the neck hair is being picked out. Cheetahs are really, really good for this sort of light. And it's, it's when I go out and I head out and we think it's going to be a morning or an afternoon where there's going to be good light, they're a really good species to hopefully find, and hopefully find in the right area. And if you're lucky, they may get active as well. So in this case, two of the cubs start playing around, as well as getting the shape and the beautiful light, the shape of the cats. The fact that we're actually positioned and we've got the light on the other side is when all the dust has been flicked up when with their playing. We've obviously managed to catch the light through the dust, and that just helps to emphasize the sort of motion that is happening with the cheetahs at that point. Just moving on to lions, we'll come back to cheetahs in a bit more. So shortly, you can tell it's my favorite animal. But just in terms of lions, I mean, male lions in particular is obviously one of the sort of iconic, African animals. And in this case, this was back in November last year. And we headed out on the plane, and our guide that day, Saruni, he basically found a pride of lions which actually got 5 males. And it was still relatively dark, the sun still hadn't risen. So you're feeling very hopeful that it wasn't that cloudy. There was some cloud in the sky, but you're feeling quite hopeful. And then all of the lions got up and they started to walk down the hill, straight towards some bushes. So you're going through that point where you've set everything up really, really well. The guide's been brilliant. He's found, a really good set of animals to photograph, and more importantly, actually to be with, because that's a huge part, is actually being there. Whatever the photos just capture a certain proportion of your trip. But what happened was all of the lions moved down the hill and went into the bushes, and then the light started to appear, which was obviously slightly frustrating. But this male lion very kindly got up and decided to walk back out into the light. So, somebody was being very, very kind to me that morning. And so again, it would be a lovely shot from the other side. You'd have him golden from the light shining directly on him. But we've chosen to actually basically get the light behind him. So it's a different shot from what we had with the cheetahs. I've actually obviously got some of the sky in here. The clouds helping, because the clouds are actually helping to diffuse the light a little bit. But I've chosen to, put him sort of, I've chosen to put quite a lot of foreground in the shot, and that really is to help pick up the light, to pick up some of the grass, build up to the lion, and you can look at the line and it's really obvious what that is. It's picking the lineup of, so it's picking out, the light's picking out the line of his mane, and the stance. And you can sort of, for me, that's kind of, really one of my sort of favorite lion photos that I've taken, definitely recently, probably one of my favorite ones, because you can tell what it is. And I think, it feels quite powerful to me. Again, from an exposure perspective, I think, it really is about playing around. And in this case, he stood there for quite a while. So you've got a little bit of time to try different exposures, try different things out, try maybe different focal lengths, and positioning of where he is. It's a bit more helpful when you've got a little bit of time, especially if the light's not changing too quickly, just to try things out. But exposure is a critical one, because you can get different feelings from the photo accordingly, which I'll show you in a second. This is a slightly different line. It's on the same trip, so it's back a month or so ago. I prefer the last shot, because the last shot is, for me, feels a lot more dramatic. But this probably would do a lot better on Instagram. Back to people preferring things on a lot more portrait shots on Instagram, a lot more things that hit you straight away, rather than having to look for the species, and because we're looking at a screen so small. I do like this shot, but I much prefer the previous one. But in this case, obviously, you can get a lot more features from the face. And the light is, I mean, his mane is just perfect for backlight. So yes, you get the glow from the grass behind him and so on, but his mane is really, really picked out. And what I did on the next shot is it's exactly the same situation, but I think I basically reduced the exposure probably by a full stop. It's not everyone's cup of tea, I get that. It's just a different way of looking at him. But you still, by looking at that, I still know exactly that it's a male lion. I still know, you've obviously got, because we've darkened the exposure, you've got a different richness in terms of the color of the light. And funny enough, actually, when I go out, it's amazing how immaculate some of these lions are. You know, normally you go out and they look, their manes are stunning. They look like they've gone out on full blow dry. My hair is looking really messy. I look like I've just got out of bed because I have. And and it's amazing how stunning they look, even though they've spent all night laying in a bush or laying in long grass or something. He actually, funny enough, in this particular photo, to me, looks like he has got bad hair. He's, the back of his hair is a bit squashed, but still a stunning cat. This morning, this was about a year ago, and I'm talking about trying to take shots in good light. That trip, ironically enough, I think we had 4 or 5 days in a row with no good light whatsoever. And it's a roll of the dice. It was quite rare not to get any particularly good light, but it was just one of those periods of time. And we went out with our guide that morning, who's Jimmy, and really, really good guide. And he was suggesting that we tried a pride of lions, so we set off to try and find them. And we found them again before sunrise. They'd taken down a wildebeest, so most of the pride were there, but there was a lone female that was away from the rest of the pride, and he basically suggested that we actually focused on her. So this is a female. You can see that the sun's just starting to rise, and you're starting to get some of the colours. So at that point, the light was still quite dark, but you're getting a bit of blue, bit of purple. And then the light basically started to develop. And in this case, I mean, I was probably about maybe a full stop under from an exposure perspective. But, the red light was just absolutely stunning. And I mean, ideally, she would have stood up, but she would, you can't have everything. But the light is obviously picking up the ears, picking up the side of the face, and you're getting the glow through the grass. And then, I think maybe a minute later, so this is watching the light develop, and the light that was there, it went from the purple and blues to red to this gorgeous orange glow. And again, this is probably one of my favorite line shots that I've taken. I love the contact with the eyes. I love the fact that the light has picked up the glow around her ears, and just the soft tones through the photo. So really, if you're familiar with backlight, carry on using it. If you're not, if you've got certain wildlife species that you've got an opportunity to try and take photos of, I really would recommend, trying to use it. Don't be afraid. This isn't about shooting directly into the sun. This isn't about doing it, when the sun's a lot higher and it's harsh. This is about doing it really, really at the very start and the very late of the day. So you really got to be outside to do that. This is a morning. So I'm going back to cheetahs. So this is a morning again back just over a month ago. And this is a cheetah, slightly different things. I'm doing a little bit of silhouettes, but because it's one of my favorite things. But this is a cheetah called Kasaru, and she had 2 cubs before we got out there. But unfortunately, the day before this photo was taken, her cubs got separated by a troop of baboons, and unfortunately, that her daughter was lost. So at this point, she was left with one male cub at the moment. Touch wood, they're still doing well. But it was kind of a strange time. They were still in the same area, which is why we knew where to find her. And they were up on a termite mound. A termite mound's quite a good spot. I mean, it's kind of an iconic photo really is to have cheetahs on termite mines. They use them for a vantage point. They use them for hunting so they can see around, but also they use them for safety. So at night, one of their big risks is a big pride of lions coming through. In terms of one of the key dangers for them, and this obviously gives them a vantage point. They can see quite long distances to actually see if there's any danger nearby. So they did spend the night on a termite mound. They were still crying for the baby, which was heartbreaking. The son was, they would have been playing a lot with the other cub, and had obviously lost its playmate. And that changes over time when you're down to one cub. He learned to, that mum is now his playmate, and poor old mum went from getting a little bit of peace to having to take all the brunt of all his playful antics. But that's part of him learning how to hunt. But this particular morning, we found them on the termite mound, just before sunrise, best time of the day, and so here, this is obviously a shot taken with a wide angle, and the sky's starting to develop. I actually really like the tree in this as well. I think the tree is quite important in terms of just giving some balance to the photo. So a few minutes later, the light obviously started to change, and we started to get the glow and the light through the clouds. So same spot, slightly wide, my wide angle is, I'm trying to think, I think this is about 15 millimeters or something like that. So, but obviously got more into the shot. Now we've got the cub actually peering over, having a look, but the beautiful colors in the sky. As it happened that day, the clouds stayed in front of the sun, so we didn't have the gorgeous glowing light, but this is, a slightly different angle with the cub and mum as the clouds. And, I like the whole sort of scene behind them and where they're positioned. But again, if I go back to the story, the tree to me is really important in these shots. And whilst this is front light, so I've been talking about backlight, backlight, this is obviously still good light, but the critical thing here for me is it's a different termite mound, but it's the background behind them. So it could be a moody sky, it could be a stormy sky. It's actually the backdrop of a hill, and it was the hill was still in shade. So because by underexposing, you basically darken that background, and it obviously just helps to emphasize, the colors of the cheetahs, but also the orange, the bright orange eyes that the cheetahs have. And then, ironically enough, a few days later, we changed camp. We went to a different conservancy, a neighbouring conservancy. So the Mara has got the National Reserve, and it's got a number of conservancies to the north of it. And a few days later, we heard that Kasadu and her cub would actually move from the conservancy we were in into the one that we were now in, which was very, very kind of her. So we saw her with the cub one night, the next morning still in the same area. So you're getting a pattern here. And when we found her, she then chose to cross over a really large plain. So as she was doing that, she went past a lot of the different types of antelope and gazelles and so on. And she did this right when the sun was starting to rise, but also when we started to have a small shower as well. So here she is crossing the plain. You can see some of the zebra behind. The zebra's far too big for her, but they're obviously alert because they know that there's a predator there. She's just been a bit sneaky and taking a look at them, but she's got no chance of taking them down. She's far too small. But you've got that lovely shape of her body, the light again under her tummy, and that front paw, just suggesting that she might be a little bit cheeky and try and have a go, even though she definitely won't. And her and the cub, crossed over the plains. So, for me, the light in these shots, but also the fact that the light is catching the rain as it's falling is just something that's a little bit different. And again, mum with the cub with the light coming down. So just a very, very different atmosphere compared to the previous shots that I've seen. But all of these are all, with the exception of the silhouette shots, are all really trying to use the backlight as much as possible. Okay. And just touching on leopards. So leopards, I have spent a lot of time. I've been very, very lucky to spend a lot of time with leopards, specific leopards in particular. Never actually got them in backlight yet. They're really the one thing with them when we're saying the cheetahs are probably going to stay in the same spot. One of the key things with leopards is if you find a leopard with a kill. In a tree, the chances are, they'll stay there for a few days because obviously that's where their supply of food is, or that they'll keep heading back there. Hasn't I've got some nice silhouette shots of leopard in trees, but I haven't, ironically enough, got any like I have with the cheetahs and the lions. But the one thing for me is, often you will get, if you're lucky enough to find leopards, they will be in a tree. It's quite a high probability anyway. And one thing that can be quite challenging is really the contrast between the shadows of that the branches do and the dappled light that you can get. So so one of the key things for me is, I would underexpose these shots quite significantly. So again, might be a full stop, might be a little bit more, would be trying things out to really make sure that the shadows are really, really dark. And shadowy and the key bit really is you can first of all that you can see what it is and it's not too messy, so it's obviously a cat, and if you know your cats it's a cheetah. A cheetah is a leopard, sorry Linda. But the key thing is that you've actually got the eye in focus and the eye's got that glint in, so you can get that, you can see the glint of light that's in the eye. um a similar shot. This is Fig, who anybody that's follows me on Instagram might have heard of. But this was a really hard shot to take because she was up in a tree. There was quite bright light on her. So again, this was massively underexposing, but you know that it's a leopard. And again, you've just got that light in her face. And the crosses really are at the branches of the tree.
Let me slide a question in real quick. Jamie was curious, do you spot meter in this case to keep the animal exposed properly?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm always I basically just use I don't spot meter at all now.
Okay.
So I mean I'm generally messing around. I'm just generally changing my exposure accordingly.
Okay. And then
Um I think sometimes I think probably the one time that I might change my metering would be with leopards in trees, but not when I've got cheetahs, for instance, that are moving.
let me ask another one. Um, Mika's question is roughly how far away are you from your subjects?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what distance it would be. I mean, most of these shots would be taken with something like 400 millimeters, and a number of them will have been cropped as well. So generally speaking, we're quite a significant distance. Um, you know, in all honesty, some animals are more tolerant than others, but obviously you do not want to crowd them. And with cheetahs in particular, it's really important. I mean, the areas that I stay in, there's a limit on how many vehicles can be near the cats. So there's at any one time there's a maximum of 5 vehicles. Sometimes you're very lucky and it's just you. But the critical thing is, cheetahs are an endangered species, and they're really, really struggling. And one of the challenges that there has been in certain areas is that there's too many vehicles around them, and they've lost cubs because they can't see around the vehicles, and they can't get the viewpoint. And at the end of the day, I'm there because I really want to enjoy these species, and there's lots to be said for good quality, sustainable tourism. In some of these areas, but you do not want to be the person responsible for an animal getting harmed just so you can take a photograph. So, I mean, I think for me, an ideal lens, if you're going somewhere like this, is something, focal length is generally like 300 to 400 millimeters is quite a good one to use on these size of subjects.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry if that was a long-winded answer.
It's okay. The
Um,
more information you're willing to share. I mean, one, you're putting us in place, you're putting us kind of in the situation, and you're giving us like some technical tips that, we can kind of put back in our little memory that maybe we'll pull them out one day. If we ever go and I'm sitting next to you, you're going to walk me through it like I'm a little child.
Oh, no, not at all. It'd be so exciting if you ever do come. Be trying to get you away from your first zebra, that'll be the problem.
It's going to be a problem.
We'll see more. I can still remember seeing my first ever zebra in the wild, I have to say. So yeah.
Oh,
Um, these are just a few shots of, in black and white. In some ways, if a light's really good, it feels a bit like sacrilege. But some of this is me just seeing how different this can look. So cheetah backlight again. You can see that the neck hair being brought out, and these are just slightly different techniques. So these are really underexposed, and then obviously I've gone into Lightroom, black and white, and really brought the whites, really taken down the sort of the highlights and the blacks. But it's I would much rather the first image that I showed of Quelly, the back with the backlight and the shape and the sort of more golden light, is actually, I was about to say I'd much rather have that on my wall. It's actually on my wall. But I like these sorts of images as well because it's just that real sort of clean outline of the cats, and it's a big cat in terms of these sorts of shots. That's actually it's not the same shot, but it's one of the same series of shots as the first one that I showed. And it's just that it's very, very simple in terms of the lines, and just it's something that's a little bit different from the other shots that I've shown. But it's just also things like the detail of the hairs on the chin and her eyebrows and things. So whiskers on above her eyes and things, eyebrows. I'm very, very quickly just going to show a couple in terms of light from the UK, and if there's time, we'll go into a few more. You have to tell me, Linda, if I've got time, but I will be quick.
we're good.
Okay. In terms of the UK, um, we don't have the same animals, we don't have the same birds as there are in Kenya, but we still have some really cool stuff. And it did, I have to be honest, it really took lockdown for me to properly start using my camera in the UK, which is shocking. Some of it was time, some of it was knowing, about location, some of it was being quite lazy, to be honest. But one of the species that we do have that probably is my favorite in the UK is a barn owls, and we're lucky that they do, especially in the summer, they hunt during the day. We have very long days in the north of England in the summer, and we also, they're hunting out for their young. So especially if there's periods of bad weather, they'll definitely be out hunting. But in the summer, when they're really, they're really warming up to get their young out of the nests, they're really active during the day. So it's quite fortunate. And I think they are a great species in terms of having good light and having backlight. The long days, and I think this actually was taken in January, and I think it was afternoon, so it wasn't a really early start. But in the next photo that I show you, and when we do go out sort of May, June time on a regular basis, it really is sort of half three starts just to get there for the light. So but it's really, really worth it on the days when the light is good. And you can see with a species like this, with the light behind, you're basically picking out all of that detail because it's obviously a pale bird. But if you look at all the detail that you can see in the feathers, it really is a really good subject for backlight. I said earlier that you really need land as a contrast. So if you go back to the previous one, the dark behind actually is woodland. The woodland's in shade, so you've got that lovely contrast between the bird and the dark woodland. In this case, it's actually against the sky, but the sun is literally only just starting to rise. I think this is full frame because it kind of flew and I just lifted my lens and hoped. And normally I would not like shots where it's so tightly cropped, but you've got a little bit of bokeh. And the thing, the light coming through the feathers again, all that detail that you can see. There's a little line, ironically, coming off at the back. I chose not to take that out because it's actually real, and they pick up bits of random grass and sticks and cobwebs and everything when they dive into the undergrowth to hunt. But it's also the detail on the feet that I really like as well. So, just the shine off the claws, the talons, sorry, I'll be in trouble with Vince for that one. But it's just a slightly different shot. And although it's cropped, I've still kept the wings in, so I won't be in too much trouble. We also have hares, and again, something, this isn't actually in the same area as that last shot was taken, and they're quite fun species. In this case, it's really going out and noticing things and seeing things and trying and trying and trying again. This case, there was a group of hares in the summer that regularly, join up in the same sort of space. They actually fight. And they sit around, they eat a bit, they scratch a bit, they go to sleep, everything looks calm, and then they go crazy. So in this case, the backlight has enabled, the breath to pick up the breath, which, for me is quite cool. Not quite the same as a cheetah with the dust from earlier on, but you get the activity, you can see the lights being picked up. But one thing that, what that our hares do is that they box. I've only seen it a few times, really. It's really, really cool when you do. I was hoping that they would do that in the first thing in the morning in the best light, and at one point they actually did. So in this case, I always thought it was the males that fought over the females, but it's actually the female that's testing the man out. So she gets a little bit annoyed because he keeps going around sniffing her all the time. And after a while, to try and test him out to see whether he's worth it or not, she'll turn around and they'll box. So, if I think getting a shot of them boxing in any light is good, actually, to be honest. I'd be quite happy with. But in this case, I really like, obviously I like the fact that the lights are good. You've got the two other hares that are running off, and it's quite hard probably to see on the screen, but actually there's some moisture from the dew that's been flicked off that's been highlighted as well. Very quickly, we have kingfishers. We only have one kingfisher in the UK. Very beautiful. Normally, I'd say do not bother doing backlight. Couldn't help it if it actually landed in the wrong place, and so it was backlight. But it is picking out the light on the feet. It's picking out the green. But what this particular kingfisher did was ate its fish, turned round, had a shake, and because you have got the light in the way that it is, all the moisture that's coming off it when it shook is all highlighted. So it's just something that's a little bit different. And if you're in your garden or you're in your park, you might not like daddy long legs as we call them, or maybe crane flies they're called over there. But this is just picking up a few insects and bees. Having the light behind you, you can just try these things in your own garden or if you have these sorts of things, or nearby in a park, just to try something out with different light. Okay. Can it? Yeah, and in the same way that I had the cheetah with the rim, this is actually a young hare as well. Okay, I'll very quickly. So tell me, Linda, when my time's running out. I'll very quickly just touch on some aspects of weather. So, in the Mara, down in the National Reserve and in the Mara Triangle, there's a big area of marshland, and so on this particular morning, it's quite common down there because of the moisture that's held in this sort of almost like a basin, that you can get quite misty conditions. And this particular morning, we headed down. The light was starting to develop. And for me, this is kind of a very sort of calming, serene shot because, just having a lone elephant feeding in the long grass with a light of going through the mist. When I was there when I was there in November, we actually had a morning where there was just thick fog. I've never seen it like that before. It does happen every now and again, but it's quite rare. And on this particular morning, somehow Johnson, our guide, found a male leopard out on the plain. I don't know how, because you could barely see the back of your hand. And it was just, I put these in really because it's quite unusual conditions. And, if you think about the lion that we saw earlier on with that, that golden light and the mane all being lit up, this was obviously very, very different. So the lion crossed the plain. It was really hard, actually. I found it really hard to focus. I've got a mirrorless camera, and it was really struggling at times about what to pick up. But it's just sorry, this has been cropped slightly funnily. I don't know how it's come through as it has, but it's just very unusual conditions to actually see the lions, and it's a different type of atmosphere as far as I'm concerned in terms um, of the sort of weather conditions that you would normally see them. And you can see, you know, he's also got quite wet with the dew and so on. One of the things, obviously, that I love about Africa really is the skies. And you know, seeing something, I have it sometimes in the UK where I see really, really beautiful light, really beautiful skies. And I just long for an elephant or a giraffe to cross it. But doesn't obviously happen in the UK. But sometimes, and it doesn't always happen, you know, things go well in the UK and sorry, in Kenya, and the giraffe or the elephant are in the right place. So in this case, you know, it really is, you know, a little bit of luck. It's seen that there's good skies. It's letting your guide know that you're interested and trying to go to the areas where you've got that big wide open space to see whether anything is nearby and is likely to cross it. And again, in terms of elephants, this one is actually taken really low down. So some elephants are pretty tolerant. I'm obviously in a vehicle because that's a safe place to be, but it's holding the camera as low as I can get it to try and get those elephant actually underneath. But you can see that, you know, the sky is starting to develop. It's starting to be a it's starting to get almost like storm-like conditions. There's rain in the background. So really, when I see those sorts of weather conditions starting to happen, it's then trying to work out what species can we find, which generally going to be, you know, the good ones are generally going to be elephant or giraffe to actually put in front of those skies. And another key important thing on, you know, if you're taking a shot of elephants in this sort of way, especially when there's more than one, is having something like F12, F14, something where you actually can make sure that you get all the detail in the elephant that you're focusing on, but also the elephants are close by as well. So just in terms of rain, this is a female leopard, Nalango, on the left and her son on the right. He's actually should have been thrown out and he should have gone his own way a lot earlier than this. She's actually quite an old leopard, and there's a theory that she's actually keeping him and feeding him and everything else a lot longer just to make sure he's stands a better chance of surviving. Whether that's true, who knows? But on this particular day, we were with Jaziri, so her son, and then he heard a call, got up and started to move to mum. It then started to rain, so you can see the raindrops in the sky. I actually, then you're in a call. You'll see in another few photos time that sometimes, you know, what I'll try and do is if it's raining, slow the shutter speed right down so you can start to get the lines rather than the dots of the rain. You start to see the lines of the rain to try and make the shot a little bit more interesting. But in this particular case, two leopards are coming together and you knew there was going to be some sort of interaction. So I chose to keep a faster shutter speed. It'll be something like 800 or 1,000th of a second, something like f7, 1, f8, because I want to make sure that both leopards are focused. And I chose, you know, to get the interaction. And yeah, ironically enough, you know, mum looks like she's not overly happy about her son. She's actually come to actually take him probably about, she walked for probably about 45 minutes to a kill that she'd got in a tree. So he was quite lucky actually. But, you know, I like the interaction, but I also like the fact that you've got the rain in the background. This is a slightly different shot. This was back in November again. So it's twice really that we got the early morning rain at the same time as the light. But I've slowed the shutter speed down here. There's no real sort of standard thing to do because obviously it really depends how heavy the rain is in the first place. But if what I'll be trying to do in these sorts of situations, and it's the same in the UK, and the rare chances that I am actually out shooting, is I'll try and slow the shutter so you can start to, you know, really properly see the raindrops. I think on this case, it will be something like 2/50th of a second, but like I say, it really depends on the speed of the rain. And on this shot here, it was actually virtually dark, actually. It just shows how good cameras are these days. But what the cheetah, sorry, I keep getting my leopards and cheetahs wrong today. What the cheetah So this is Sila. She'd been really struggling to hunt, and then there's a massive, huge storm. You could see it developing behind us, and it came across. And what she did was, when it really, really was heavy rain, she used that as a distraction for nearby gazelles. They were so focused on, the fact they were getting wet. She took the opportunity and made a kill, which obviously enabled her and her two cubs at the time to feed. But they were absolutely drenched. You can see how wet both her and this cheetah cub is here. But whilst it was raining, I reduced the shutter speed right down. So if you can see that there's lines through the shot, and I think this is probably about 100th, 150th of a second, just so you can get the rain with the slow shutters, just to make sure that you can actually see that rain effect. And this obviously, rain, but thankfully it's in the distance. And one lovely thing sometimes is that when you can see quite long distances on the plains of the Mara, and you can see the weather developing all around you. And if you're lucky, well, sometimes it's actually nice to be caught by the rain, but you don't want to be caught by the rain all the time. But you can see all the weather conditions around you, some of the storms developing, some of the, lightning in the distance, and in this case, quite a big shower further down into the National Reserve, but us keeping dry at the same time. So, for me, I've got a male bull elephant. The sky's quite impressive, but really it's the rain that actually, is the key bit of the photo, and it's the elephant that helps emphasize that. And just a little bit in terms of, the storms developing. So, again, it's just watching all around you, the sky's getting darker. And in some cases, the animals responding to that as well. These are quite unusual. You see leopards up trees. Occasionally you see cheetahs up trees. It's not that normal, at least in the Mara, to see lions up trees, but these lions particularly like this one tree. And for me, having the lions in the tree, which is quite unusual, but that dark sky, it's a dark sky that's really important. If it was a white, washed out sky, not so interesting. Probably would be black and white by that point. But the dark sky and the lion looking out makes it quite a powerful image. And on here, the same thing again. So the storms are starting to develop. A lion is very kindly positioned very nicely out on the rocks. And again, for me, if I had to choose an image, I do like portrait shots. I do like seeing close-up shots of animals, but it's also nice to have animals in their environment and to see them in the space and in the environment and that they're in, how you use the sky, how you use the light. And for me, having the lion quite small in the frame, but having that dark sky, what species it is. And it really makes you wonder, what she's thinking, how she's feeling about the conditions and so on. And another storm and a big bull elephant out in the storm. So the skies are really developing in this case. Occasionally, I will also do black and white. This is probably one of my favorite giraffe photos. It's a few years old now, but I'm down low in the grass. The thing for me is, you got the storm, so you got the dark skies starting to develop, but the giraffe looks tiny because obviously the grass near my lens is quite long. I'm quite lucky, really, that it's still quite clear. It's not all too messed up with the grass. But it's that dark, ominous sky that sort of balances it against the tiny little giraffe in the shot. Another elephant with a dark sky. And I'll just skip onto here. So this was a time where we were actually with a leopard. So, I do generally like my big cats. But you could see that the sky was starting to develop and it was really, really starting to darken. So we made the call actually to see whether or not there's a big wide open plain nearby. This actually was the one that the cheetah and the cub crossed earlier on with the raindrops. And we made the call to see whether anything was there. And luckily there was a small herd of elephants starting to cross. So Often I will try and be low down with the with elephant, just try and, get their size. But this really was about the sky. So, they're obviously quite low in the frame. I wanted to start seeing the buildup of the clouds. But also, if you get too low down, the last thing I wanted was that you can see the line of bushes behind them. I don't want that line right across the elephant. I want the elephants to not have any clutter behind them, effectively have a clear background. So that's why I chose, actually, rather than to be low, I'm actually stood up quite high. And it's the same in this shot as well. So go back to most times I want to be low down. And in this case, it's the sky that's important, and also I don't want the elephants to have the land cut off through them. I want to be able to see the whole elephant with the background of the grass. So the sky is building up. You can see the storm in the distance. Look, ironically enough, we didn't get wet at all. It was all around us. I think when we went back to camp, which was only a few miles away, camp had really heavy rain, and we were lucky because we were still dry. And then the elephants continued to progress, and as the sun started to lower, the sky is obviously really, really dark. I think again this was quite underexposed, probably a full stop. I'd normally say that elephants, you kind of really want dull light often with elephants, and really it's about the big skies. But because we've got that golden light coming across and that really dark, sort of moody sky behind them, it just gives a slightly different image for them. And very quickly, UK weather, and then I'm nearly done. So back to barn owls, my favorite subject. But this is very early in the morning, good light. But also it's an area which is effectively marshlands. So in the same way as when we talked about the elephant at the start, this can get quite misty in the mornings. Sometimes with mist, I've taken photos in mist of various things, and they just don't work at all. But in this case, because there's a glimpse of mist, there's a frost actually that's on the grass and the bottom of the frame. It actually worked pretty well. And this is one of my favorite barn owl shots, because there's a big old oak, gnarly old oak tree in the background. I love that tree. If I go back to the cheetah shots from earlier on, one of the things that I really liked about the cheetah on the mound was the tree on the side. For me, I love the tree. You've got the mist that's going across. You've got the frost still on the ground. The light is nice, and ideally the bird would be slightly further on the right hand side, but I can't have everything. But yeah, to me, it's not just the bird; it's the fact that it's the whole picture, and I think the tree is massively important. And again, that it's an owl. It's small in frame, but it's a scene. It's a story in itself. In this particular, it's in the same area. It's a different owl, actually. There's a few owls in this area close to where I live. And again, it's misty conditions. And this particular male, we called him Ashley because he lived in an ash tree. You can see that he's got very, very wet. This is because he's actively hunting for his young. He's gotten the owls, barn owls, really don't like flying in the wet because they haven't got waterproof feathers, so it's really hard work for them. But he's really had no choice. He's got his eyes closed, so he looks very, very tired as well. But the misty conditions to me really work in this case. And just back to rain, I mean, these next few are actually taken in sort of hides in sort of nature reserves close by. The first one being an osprey, so it really, really poured it down with rain that day. The osprey came in and then shook. So back to sort of shutter speeds. Lucky to have quite a dark background, and it was autumn, so you can start to see that the leaves are fall for you. So the leaves are starting to change colour. But the bit, you've got the drop, it looks quite miserable and a bit grumpy. You've got the droplet coming off his beak, but also, with him shaking and with the raindrops as well. I think it's, quite an interesting image because of the rain itself. And, back to the kingfisher that we saw earlier, this is the type of kingfisher we get in the UK. The interesting bit of the image for me is the fact that I've slowed the shutter right down for the rain. So you got these long lines coming down, and he just, you can just see him looking up, thinking, is it ever going to stop? Not that he will care so much about rain like I do, but yeah, for him, it's just that the fact that you got the fact that he's actually looks like he's looking at those weather conditions. And I think this might be the last one. This is just a barn owl in the Yorkshire Dales. It's winter. It's really hard for them some days. At the moment, we've had endless rain and long, really high winds. Quite a lot of the UK has got issues with flood alerts and stuff at the moment. The city I live in at the moment, the centre has got, very high water levels, and the rivers have overflown. And for the owls, it's really hard because we go back to the fact that they don't have waterproof feathers, so they have to take the opportunities to hunt when they can. And in this particular case, I was lucky. I was in a car and he just landed in the right place. But he's got wet feathers. It's quite hard work. You can see how wet the stone wall is. But it's the weather conditions actually that not the light, but it's the weather conditions that actually make the photo for me. Oh, and the final one, rainbow. So we had a really massive storm when we were out shooting owls. The ironic thing was stayed completely dry. Somebody was looking after me that day, and this big flock of gulls. So not the most interesting. Would have been nice if it was a more interesting bird. Big flock of gulls went past past a huge rainbow that we had, and it was just capturing that moment at that time. Okay. And that's me done. Thank you.
Okay, just these simple little photos that you threw together.
I've got another 90 if you
You did great. You were like, oh, I've got lots of them. Okay, I've got one question here I want to ask you for Cynthia. She wants to know, I kind of know the answer. How many photographers are in the Jeep with you, or have you hired the guide on your own? Um, and the reason I think she's asking, she says, I've noticed lots of movement, blurred photos in the Jeep with several photographers together. So how
Yeah.
do you minimize that, you know?
So I at the moment I generally will either be alone, or I'll share a vehicle with one person. And which which is just part of the reason for that is it depends if I know that the people that are going to be there are going to be the type of want to do the same thing as I want to do. And if you go to some camps, you can choose to go by yourself, you can choose to share. The issue obviously with share, I mean, it can be really nice for sharing. I've met some lovely people with sharing, but the difficulties is obviously if they've got different interests to you, they don't want to get up at the same time, all those sorts of things. It can be quite a challenge. When I first started going to Kenya, I would go on group trips. They would typically be 4 people in a vehicle. Obviously, that it was a photography trip, so you've got the benefit at least of the fact that they're likely to want to do something similar. You do obviously have to be conscious of other people. But I mean, to be honest, I haven't had problems in terms of camera shake, but I think the biggest challenge would be if you went and you were not sure about who you're going to be sharing the vehicle with, whether they have similar interests.
Okay. All right. I think I did a very good job of catching all the questions. And it comes down to saying thank you, Charlotte. Um, Thank you for doing this because I know this is a lot of work to go through your photos, and then you have that emotional debate of how you're going to like thin it down and trim it down, because it's like picking it's like picking your favorite child or something, or favorite cat for you. It's like your favorite cat, and it's very difficult. There just aren't bad pictures that come from you, and I know that you must have them. You're just smart enough not to show them. So, guys, if you're at all interested, if Kenya specifically is on your bucket list, and you're looking for someone to go with, Charlotte is starting to do workshops. So you can reach out to her through her website. I will link that in the show notes so that you can find it. Charlotte, thank you so much for sharing what you know and staying up really way past your bedtime to show us your beautiful photos. And your behind the scenes stories are always going to be one of my favorite things. The chat is full of nice comments for you, my friend, and I'll make sure you get that. Next week, storm chaser Jonah Lang will be here to share his presentation, Nature's Fury, inside the world of photographing storms and extreme weather. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.